Welcome back to the Indian Wisdom Podcast. I'm Dr. Raj Balkaran, and you're looking for inspired insight, which you can perhaps apply to your life. There have been a number of requests for content on Shiva, the great god Shiva. Why is this? Well, there is a particular juncture in the Hindu calendar coming up called Shivaratri, the night of Shiva, where aspirants, devotees, seekers um, hold an all night vigil, or they'll stay up as long as possible in order to honor the great god Shiva. Now, what's this all about? Why would anyone want to do this? And why now? Well, I think it's time for us to talk about time. There is, of course, mechanistic time, ticking of the clock, the seconds and hours, the minutes, the days, the weeks. There's the passage of objective time, right? Mechanistic time. And then there is meaningful time, subjective time. This is time that is conditioned by milestones, rites of passage, experiences. Yes, this is why we perceive various hours to either go by very quickly or to be drawn out laboriously. So time is a very funny thing indeed, because time is the carrier, the vehicle of experience. All experiences are born of time, i.e., all temporal, phenomenal, mundane experiences. Perhaps there are experiences, or there is an experience that is predicated upon the transcendence of the temporal, but we'll leave that tantalizing thought for another day. Let us turn to the time of Shivaratri, the night of Shiva. Well, the Indian calendar has to do with the positions of the heavenly bodies, most importantly, the sun, Surya, source of all, and the moon, Chandra, most proximal to Earth. Now, there is a palpable difference between a full moon day, Purnima, as it's called, and any other day, or when the moon is full-ish, the day or two leading up to the full moon. Now, some folks believe this is an old wives' tale or superstition. Belief, what is belief? Who needs to believe anything they can't experience themselves? Well, go and experience it. Oh, yes, you may sit there and be like, oh, I don't feel anything different about today. Pay attention. Pay attention. You may be in an elevator and there might be some elevator music, quite literally, playing, and you may have some vague awareness that there is music there. And if attention is paid, you might actually be able to discern the melody, the composer, the instruments. Now, if you are an avid musician, i.e., one who has paid careful attention to music and music making over an extended period, such a one will be able to discern chords, even keys. Some such people have perfect pitch. They understand directly, experientially, why, I don't know, I'll pick a random classical piece of music, why Mozart's flute and harp concerto in C major needs to be in C major. The melody could be transposed to any other key, but the quality of the key of C is unique. And such a thing can be heard. It's a question of the order of resolution, right? And that is a function of the focus of attention. right? That's a function of the attention that you pay. Have a look around. Some people are really into fashion. They pay a great deal of attention to what they wear. And 95% of them pay much more attention to what other people wear because their fashionable expression is born of competition more than born of true self expression. Now, there are others who most certainly pay very little attention to what is to be worn or not worn. They may dress more pragmatically or conveniently, wear the same pair of jeans they've worn day in and day out for 5 years because it's comfortable, etc., etc., etc. So if you pay attention to the waning and the waxing cycle of the moon, you will feel quite palpably a different energy. First of all, the waning cycle and the waxing cycle are quite distinct. Some of us are more predisposed towards sensing these things than others. And when I say sensing, I mean sensing. I don't mean perceiving in an open ended sense. I don't mean projecting. There is, without question, um, a response to be had by humans en masse around the time of the filling moon. Yes, we know all the anecdotes. We have all the anecdotal evidence, quote unquote, from police officers and school teachers, etc., etc., etc. Where do we think the word lunacy comes from? It comes from the word for moon, luna, lunatic. This is because it was mistaken that the fullness or the motion of the moon actually created mental illness. This is not the case. What the brimming moon does is accentuate whatever the manas, whatever the mind is already doing. If someone is full of joie de vivre, joy of life, they might be extra gregarious and social around the full moon. If someone is full of anxiety, well, they might be a bit more panic stricken than usual. If someone is irritable, angry, violent, well, schoolyard fights, etc., etc. Don't believe anything anyone tells you. Experience for yourself. Pay attention to the waning and waxing moon. The ancients have done so. And they've divided the lunar cycle not just in terms of waning and waxing into half. They divided it into, think of a pie, think of a circle divided into 30 slices, right? So each of these slices is a different phase, if you will, is a different solely lunar configuration. Now, when the moon is directly across from the sun, you've got the full moon. When the moon is conjoined, the sun, you've got the new moon. Well, in between, Saptami, the seventh, half moon is 7-ish, right? Etc., etc. So why am I talking about these phases of the solar lunar cycle? Well, they're called tithis. And this is relevant because all of the Indic holidays, special days, are marked by tithis. This is because different tithis have different energies, energetic potentials, if you will. For example, the most famous day for Ganesha, for observance of Ganesha, is called Ganesha Chaturthi, the fourth tithi. It's on the fourth day of the solar lunar cycle. The most auspicious day for Rama in the year is Rama Navami, the ninth tithi. After the 9-night goddess festival, we have Vijaya Dashami, the 10th day of victory. So this is extremely important. Shivaratri occurs on Chaturdashi, the 14th day. Now, 14th day could mean one of two things. The 14th day of the waxing cycle, 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 14th day of is when the moon is brimming full, nearly Purnima. It'll be so full that to the naked eye, to most people who don't pay attention to the moon, oh, look, the moon is full. Yep. Close enough for jazz, as they say. Now, Shivaratri occurs on the opposite of this, the 14th day of the waning cycle, when the moon is dissolving, waning, about to be swallowed up by the sun, as it were. Okay. There's something very beautiful that happens on this day or on this night. Okay. On the 14th day of the waning cycle, if you look to the eastern horizon right before dawn, okay, that magical pulsating time, creation of the day, right before the sunrise, you will see the glorious crescent moon on the horizon, because it's about to be absorbed by the sun, as it were, before it starts waxing again. So one of the core symbols of Shiva is the crescent moon. We see the crescent moon in his hair. And when you see this, it's a skinny mini moon. It is this either Trayodashi or Chaturdashi. It is how the moon looks on the 13th, 14th-ish day of the waning cycle. Okay. Now, this happens every month. Yes. So, which Chaturdashi? Well, the waning cycle, the 14th day of the waning cycle, when the sun is positioned in sidereal Aquarius, not Western tropical Aquarius. The ancient Indic astrological system takes account for the precession of the equinoxes. It's a fixed star system. So the sun is in the sign of Aquarius. More specifically, for those out there who nerd out on all things astronomical or Jyotisha, Indian astrology, astronomy in particular, the sun typically is in Purva Bhadrapada. Okay, this is an extremely intense asterism nakshatra, and it is auspicious to or connected to Bhairava, a fierce, fiery, intense form of, you guessed it, the god Shiva. The symbol or the official deity of this nakshatra is an extraordinarily obscure ancient Vedic deity called Ajakapada. Aja, the unborn, Ekapada, the one-footed unborn one. What on earth does that mean? Well, it's esoteric. It's esoteric symbolism for a one-footed, an entity standing on one foot, connecting heaven and earth, an axis mundi, if you will. Various symbology related to this are serpents, dragons, lightning. It's an intense nakshatra that has to do with sort of the portal between this world and the next. The symbol also is a funeral cot of this and the next nakshatra. So this is a very transitional, transformational, liminal energy. Okay. The moon will be variously either in Dhanishta. That nakshatra symbol is the Damaru, Shiva's Damaru, the drum whereby he keeps count of time, or Shatabisha, which is 100 healers. Yes. So there is incredible symbology of Shiva associated with these nakshatras in this time. The ancients didn't pick these days willy-nilly. Okay. Certain configurations are conducive to certain energies. And so that night is very much conducive to invoking, imbibing, experiencing the energy of Shiva. Now, who is this Shiva? Well, that's an excellent question. And it would take an incredibly long time to answer in any comprehensive way, and still you would have questions. But Shiva, of course, is one of the most popular um, Hindu deities, if you will, often seated in some sort of yogic posture, Padmasana, Siddhasana. He is considered the primordial yogi, often seated in some sort of meditative posture, eyes half closed, um, in a reclusive, a mountainous background. His abode is the Himalayan peaks, Kailasha, and there's rich symbolism associated with Shiva. His vehicle, Vahana, is the bull. Much to be said about that. His ornament, the Bhushana, his neck is adorned with a cobra. Much to be said about that. He wears animal skins. His weapon or instrument is the trident. Much to be said about that. An extraordinarily rich figure. Now, Shiva in this form as a recluse has to do with the inward turning aspect, has to do with the pursuit of spirituality, consciousness, if you will, chitta. Yes, above and beyond a deity who is the object of a great deal of veneration, of worship, Shiva is also considered a principle. Shiva, in many traditions, is considered tantamount to or equivalent to consciousness itself. Indeed, the interplay between Shiva and Shakti, between masculine and feminine divine, amounts to the interplay between consciousness witnessing play of creation and the play of creation itself. Right? Shiva most certainly comes from South Asia, South Asian traditions, Indic traditions, and ancient times. Actually, we have in the Vedic corpus, we have narratives of Shiva not being accepted in the Vedic sacrifice and eventually being assimilated into Vedic culture and eventually receiving a share of the sacrifice. So this is an ancient deity. There are seals of a figure, seals from the Indus Valley civilization. Yes, contemporaneous with Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, very long time ago. Peaked around what? Something along the lines of 2500 to 1900 BCE. And all we have are these glorious artifacts, seals, figurines. Now, on one of these seals, we have a seeming deity, a figure seated in some sort of cross-legged posture, around whom there are beasts, and out of whose head emerges this sort of trident-looking thing. Now, we don't know who and what this is, but a great many people would conjecture that this is a deity who was worshipped in those times, who we now know as Shiva, Pashupati, Lord of Beasts. Now, on Shivaratri, folks engage Shiva in a variety of ways. Okay, there are those who may do a ritual at home, a puja, typical form of Indic ritual devotional veneration, where there might be a sacred spot or a shrine at home where one may offer incense or flame or fruits or flowers, prayers, or certainly mantra. The most common popular householder mantra for Shiva is Om Namah Shivaya. Folks may chant that for however long, perhaps one round of mala, the rosary, which is typically 108 beats. Perhaps they'll do it as a function of time. They'll do it for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour. Really, it's a question of really how much energy and time you wish to put into this. Now, to be crude, one can think of this as a high interest time. I mean, spiritually, a time where the interest is high, so investments will yield a great deal of fruit. Now, for many, they can experience that. For those who are meditators, or for those who enter trance states, it's easier, right? It's easier to slip into that state on this night, right? Various people may petition Shiva for various blessings, as we mortals tend to do, looking for this or looking for that. But, perhaps what we can do is tell a tale. I hear you like stories. You like stories? Tell a tale of Shiva, because stories teach you when you least expect it, and they stay with you. They really become the tissues of your consciousness in a very powerful way. So there are many versions of the tale I'm about to tell, but let's just riff a bit. So a long time ago, there was a great drought upon the earth. The earth was parched and dry. The animals and plants and humans were withering, and they were on the cusp of extinction. The earth cried out to the heavens, called upon Lord Vishnu, the sustainer, in her time of need. And, Vishnu goes to Lord Brahma, the creator, and interrupts his meditation and says, look, Grandfather Brahma, the earth is about to perish. We've got to do something. I don't know what to do. Surely you have something in mind. You created everything, haven't you? Well, said Brahma, in times of drought, the solution can only be one thing: water. Well, duh, said Lord Vishnu. But there's no water to be found on earth. Well, said Lord Brahma, if there's no water to be found on earth, then you need to divert water from elsewhere. Elsewhere? What do you mean? There are many, many realms in this creation of mine. Go seek out the great celestial river Ganga, the Ganges, and ask her to descend to earth. She should serve as a fine solution to all of your troubles. With that, Brahma returned to his meditation. He's the creator, so after he creates, he's kind of done. He hangs out in his, lovely little cul-de-sac somewhere in the heavens, and is either ensconced in meditation, or, he watches various Netflix specials, usually on, creation myths and whatnot. But, he doesn't really get too involved unless someone comes knocking on his door asking for this blessing or this advice. So he went back to his sadhana. Vishnu came to the abode of Ganga. And it was an impressive abode indeed. She was a mighty, mighty figure. And he pleaded his case to her. But upon being presented with Brahma's plan, Ganga laughed haughtily and replied, Earth? Down there? You expect me to leave the heavens and descend to such a crude and vulgar realm? Even if I wanted to descend, my might is too great. Did you not say the earth is feeble and weak and parched and scorched? Well, the might of such a one as me, Lady Ganga, would crack the earth in two. Yes, I did just say Lady Ganga. Draw whatever conclusions you will. So Vishnu was dismayed, and he went back to Lord Brahma's mansion, rang the doorbell, and was let in, and said, look, this isn't going to work. I asked Ganga to descend, and she said no. And she also said that, look, I'll crack the earth in two, and maybe she has a point. She's got an attitude problem for sure, but that doesn't mean she's wrong. Maybe she's got a point. And so Brahma closed his eyes for a moment and said, okay, you know what? I'm not exactly sure what the answer is, but I know intuitively that Shiva, the great god Shiva, Lord of yoga, Lord of yogis, meditating upon the Himalayan peaks, Shiva will know what to do next. Now, off with you. Sort it out. I've got some meditation to do. So, Vishnu traveled to the abode of Shiva, and he trepidatiously approached the meditating Lord because Shiva was extraordinarily powerful, and sometimes he had a bit of a temper. There's another story where he opens up his third eye and singes Kama, like the god of love, for shooting his arrows his way. That's a story for another day. But everyone knows about Shiva's temper. So he wasn't quite sure how to interrupt Shiva's trance, but he was relieved because soon after he arrived, Shiva's eyes fluttered open, and Vishnu said, "Hail Shiva, Lord of Yogis." And Shiva reciprocated, "Hail Vishnu, protector of the earth." The ever watchful third eye of Shiva, his inner eye, his Agnya chakra, had witnessed all that was transpiring. Think of it as sort of a psychic Zoom system that you can tune in, whereby you can tune into various scenes at will. Well, said Shiva, go back to Lady Ganga and inform her that I personally summon her. I request her presence here in my Himalayan abode. Tell her that I await her descent. I'll take care of the rest. And he returned to his meditation. What's with this whole meditation thing? Well, it's interesting, the division of labor. Brahma creates, Vishnu sustains, and Shiva destroys. Well, guess who has the lion's share of the work? Once Brahma is created, he just kind of hangs out and does his thing until the entire universe has been dissolved once again. All of time has elapsed. Then he has, some work to do. Until then, he's kind of hanging out. Shiva, likewise, aside from his, dalliances with Parvati and, as you've heard from an earlier tale or two, his interactions with Ganesha, etc., kind of just hangs out and meditates too, because his main work is the annihilation of all things, the dance of dissolution, the dance of destruction, the dance of bliss, the Ananda Tandav at the end of days. So between Brahma's creation and Shiva's destruction, Vishnu does all the work. Glorious, compassionate Vishnu. So Vishnu went back to the abode of Ganga, and she began to protest, and he interrupted her and said, "Look, Shiva summons you." Ganga stopped mid-sentence, astonished. She thought to herself, surely I cannot refuse the destroyer himself. But what of the earth? How will she bear my might? Still, if Shiva says descend, then descend I shall, and leave it to these foolish gods to piece the earth together once I'm done. And so, prideful as ever, but wise enough to comply, if only out of self-preservation, with a direct request from Shiva himself, Ganga flung herself from the heavens downwards to the earthly plane, becoming denser and denser and denser, transforming from a celestial to a terrestrial river, flowing directly toward the abode of Shiva upon the Himalayan peaks, all the while certain that she would crack the earth in two. Shiva positioned himself so as to receive the turbulent might of Ganga upon his own head. He took a great long inhale and connected with the center of the self, the only still point in all of the universe is actually within, not without. Thus, as she descended, the celestial river found herself slowed, calmed, grounded by the yogic presence of the Lord. For an individual who has a fairly high consciousness, high awareness, their presence is peaceful. There's a passage in the Mahabharata which says that such a one can make a place teeming with activity, teeming with beasts in the forest, for example. Such a one can make a place such as that seem perfectly still. Time slowed down as though all space were converging upon his head in his intoxicating, peaceful, pacifying presence. Ganga experienced herself as no more than one single drop of dew amid one of Shiva's matted locks. She lingered for an eternal moment in his expansive presence before, inebriated, she slid down his body, paying homage and loving respect to his feet to take his blessings before continuing down the Himalayas to hydrate, nourish, and bless the earth. Pacified by the grounding power of Shiva, the Ganges descended to earth, where she nourishes and purifies countless souls to this day, all by the grounding grace of Shiva. The story is actually told in the stories behind the poses, with relation to a certain asana, tadāsana. Okay, mountain pose, often called mountain pose. Okay, maybe I'll share a little bit of the gloss because it's asanas aside, it is relevant to the bhavana, the mode, the mood, the energy of Shiva and the energy of the pose for those of you who do asanas. There are two types of standing: mindless standing and standing with attention. By default, many of us simply mill about, standing here and there to pass the time. But the soldier stands to attention, with attention, and all the more so the yogi. You know, people think that time is the most precious thing that you have. In a sense, it is, but time is only as useful as the attention it affords you. Who wants to live a year neglected? Now, a year will be fulfilling if you are paid attention and you have meaningful experiences to pay your attention to. Okay. Like a tree whose roots bury down toward the center of the earth, so too does the yogi plant their feet firmly on the floor in standing tadāsana. Beyond the planting of the feet to mirror the roots of the tree, the yogi in tadāsana mirrors the trunk as their body is erect, allowing the flow of life sap, prana, right, life force, to vertically permeate their being, aligned with their spine, both gross and subtle. Just as the branches of the tree reach out to touch the sky, so too does the yogi in tadāsana elongate their body, the top of their head touching the sky, as it were, or at least aiming to do so, collapsing the space between heaven and earth. This energized, attentive standing is more than milling about. It is the standing which we refer to when something stands the test of time. This is the standing of trees, of pyramids, of mountains. Shiva, Lord of Yogis, both symbolizes and inhabits the mountains. Like Shiva, the mountains are grounded, secure, enduring, majestic. He is the yang principle to support the yin of Shakti. He is the riverbed without which the river could not flow. So, of the great many, many aspects of Shiva, and there are glorious, glorious tales about Shiva. For example, Shiva neutralizing the poisons churned from the oceans by the demons and the gods in pursuit of elixir. I mean, could it get more fascinating? I had intended to fold that tale into today's transmission, but it's so rich in entity that I'll devote proper attention to in a separate episode. But nevertheless, the idea maps on quite nicely. He neutralizes the poison, right? He provides grounding and safety. Okay. This is an important aspect. The energy of Shiva, or let us say the experience of grounding, is particularly important in our times, in our culture. because never before have things moved so fast. Have we been assaulted by so many sense objects, right? Stimuli, typically via the various screens to which we are glued. Never before have we been so assaulted. Have our senses been so inundated as in these times? And therefore, grounding is all the more important, to still and center yourself and really take stock of who and what you are, where you've been, where you're going, what you want, right? Check in with yourself, connect with yourself, pay attention to yourself, increase your capacity to be aware, to observe, right? Pay that attention to your life and engage in your activities consciously. At the end of the day, Shiva is consciousness. He represents complete awareness. So perhaps you've learned a thing or two about time, ritual time, cosmic time, astronomical alignments. And perhaps you've learned a thing or two about not just when is Shivaratri, the night of Shiva, but why is Shivaratri and what one might like to do on Shivaratri. The beautiful thing about these teachings is that they are perennial. They are relevant whether Shivaratri is upcoming or has passed or 6 months away, right? This is the grounding power you strive to embody and attain through your sadhana. Because with this ability, with this perspective, life looks very, very different. We're all, as I said, besieged, assaulted by various stimuli, various causes, various atrocities. The hurricane will not dwindle anytime soon, but you can learn to bear witness. You can learn to witness, by virtue of which you can abide in the eye of the hurricane. I hope you've enjoyed these transmissions a fraction as much as I've enjoyed sharing them with you. Please, if you find this content valuable, please share, please like, please subscribe. I really would love to keep this coming. Also, by all means, feel free to come and study with me at the Indian Wisdom School. Perhaps attend a retreat. If I can be of service in any way, shape, or form to your learning journey, I'm not hard to reach. Until next time, keep well and keep grounded. Namaste.